Today I will tell you about the Thanksgiving that changed everything for me. What began as a warm family dinner, filled with laughter and the smell of roasted turkey, ended with words so cruel they froze the entire table. I had simply forgotten to pour the tea. My daughter-in-law smirked, and in front of everyone, she told me that old women like me should not even sit at the table. Silence spread across the room until I stood and gave her one sentence that wiped the smile off her face and tore away her illusion of control. In that moment, I erased the very luxury she had enjoyed for years, the life I had paid for in silence. If you find meaning in stories like this, remember to like and subscribe so you never miss another chapter of Grandma Life Stories, where dignity and justice always find their voice. My name is Winifred Clark, though most people call me Winnie. I am 68 years old. For most of my life, I carried myself with quiet strength, teaching elementary school children, saving every dollar, and dreaming of nothing more than a peaceful family. My husband, Robert, passed away when our son Daniel was still in college. I raised Daniel on my own. I worked late nights. I sold jewelry I had once treasured, and I kept a shoebox of bills under my bed to make sure he never lacked what he needed. Years later, when Daniel married Vanessa, I tried to welcome her as my own daughter. At first she was polite, even charming, but there was something in her eyes I could not quite name, an impatience, a restless hunger, as if nothing was ever enough. Over time, that hunger grew sharp, and I became its target. The house in Denver, where we gathered that Thanksgiving, was not only their home, it was mine too in a way. I had poured part of my savings into its down payment, wanting Daniel and his family to have a place they could be proud of. Yet when I walked through those doors, carrying pies baked from recipes handed down 3 generations, I was treated not as someone who had helped build that home, but as a guest whose presence had to be tolerated. The evening began warmly enough. Daniel hugged me at the door, his voice tinged with relief that I had come. My granddaughter Sophia ran to me, her arms tight around my waist, whispering about her school play and how she wished I could have been there. Even my grandson, who had entered the storm of teenage years, gave me a shy smile and helped carry my casserole dish into the kitchen. But Vanessa's smile was different. It was the kind that looks bright on the surface, but has no weight beneath it. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, not with affection, but with judgment. She thanked me for coming, though her tone suggested she wished I had stayed in Boulder, in my small apartment, with its worn sofa and crooked shelves. She moved around the kitchen like a conductor directing an orchestra, her every glance at me a silent critique. When I tried to set down my pie on the counter, she whisked it away to the pantry with a quick word about having too many desserts already. The dining room shimmered with holiday lights strung across the windows. Candles flickered, their soft glow dancing on polished silverware. Daniel spoke about his projects at work. The children laughed about their new gadgets, and for a few precious minutes, I let myself believe I was part of it all. But every time my gaze met Vanessa's, her eyes told me another story, one in which I did not belong. That Thanksgiving was not the first time Vanessa had tried to push me aside, but it was the first time I pushed back. My words, spoken with calm but firm resolve, hung in the air like a bell that could not be unrung. The children looked at me with wide eyes. Daniel lowered his gaze, unsure of which side to take, and Vanessa, for all her confidence, could not hide the flicker of shock. I only knew one thing. I had been quiet too long, and this Thanksgiving would mark the day everything changed. The clinking of forks against china filled the dining room, a rhythm of comfort and tradition. Laughter rolled across the table, Daniel speaking about a project at work, the children trading quick jokes about school. The glow of candles softened the edges of the room, and for a moment I allowed myself to breathe, to feel that perhaps I belonged. I reached for the teapot, fingers brushing the warm porcelain, ready to pour into the cups lined neatly in front of me. Then I froze. I had forgotten to fill them earlier. Before I could rise, before I could quietly correct my mistake, Vanessa's voice cut through the air like glass shattering. Old women like you shouldn't even sit at this table. This family isn't yours anymore. The words struck harder than any blow. The sound of a chair scraping stopped mid-motion. A fork clattered softly against a plate. and suddenly the room was carved in silence. My granddaughter Sophia's eyes widened, lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the muscle in his jaw tightening. My grandson looked down at his plate, cheeks flushed with confusion. I felt the burn of humiliation crawl up my neck, but I would not bow. I stood slowly, pushing back my chair, letting its legs grind against the hardwood floor. My voice, steady and cold, sliced through the silence. "Then stop calling me when you need money." The impact was immediate. Vanessa's smirk vanished, color draining from her face only to return as a blotchy flush. Her hand tightened around her wine glass, the stem trembling. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then pressed her lips together, eyes darting toward Daniel as if daring him to intervene. Daniel's throat worked, but he said nothing. He looked down, fiddling with his napkin, caught between the woman who raised him and the wife who ruled his home. His silence was more deafening than any words could have been. Sophia whispered, "Grandma," her voice small, almost broken, but I lifted a hand gently to quiet her. This was not her burden. This was mine. The candles flickered as if responding to the tension. Every pair of eyes at that table was locked on me or her. The weight of decades of sacrifice pressed against my chest, but with it came the steel of resolve. Vanessa let out a brittle laugh, her tone sharp. "Oh, how dramatic! Always reminding us of your so-called generosity, as if this house or this table would collapse without you. You see yourself as indispensable. But let's be honest, Winnie, you're nothing but a relic we tolerate out of pity." I did not flinch. A relic who kept the lights on when you couldn't pay the bill. A relic who covered tuition when you complained about expenses. A relic who helped build the roof over your head. If that is what you call useless, then perhaps you should think about who really holds this family together. The room vibrated with silence again, thicker now, suffocating. Sophia's fork slipped from her hand, clinking against her plate. My grandson shifted uncomfortably, stealing glances between his mother and me. Daniel still said nothing, his shoulders tense, his eyes locked on the table as if it could offer an escape. Vanessa leaned forward, voice low but venomous. "This is my family, my home, my children. You are just a guest who overstays. You don't belong here. Not anymore." The words could have broken me once. Tonight they hardened me. I straightened my back, meeting her glare without hesitation. "A guest who paid the entry fee, Vanessa. Don't forget that." Her face twisted, the calm hostess mask tearing away. "You think money gives you a seat? You think writing checks makes you part of us? No, Winnie, it makes you pathetic, begging for relevance by buying affection." I could hear Sophia's breath hitch. Daniel finally lifted his head, his eyes meeting mine for only a second before shifting away. I knew then he would not defend me, not tonight. His fear of confrontation, his loyalty divided, had chained him to silence. I stepped closer to Vanessa, not in aggression, but in certainty, lowering my voice so each word struck with precision. Pathetic is using someone's sacrifices and then erasing their existence once you've drained them dry. Pathetic is forgetting who stood by you when no one else would. Her glass slammed against the table, red wine sloshing over the rim, staining the white cloth. The children flinched. Daniel muttered her name in warning, but she ignored him, her eyes locked on me, blazing with fury and humiliation. For a heartbeat, the air felt heavy enough to crush. My heart pounded, but not from fear, from clarity. The mask was off, hers and mine. No more quiet acceptance. No more swallowing insults for the sake of peace. I sat back down, folding my napkin carefully, my gaze never leaving hers. "You wanted me silent, Vanessa, but you will hear me tonight, and you will remember every word." No one spoke. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause. I saw in her eyes not just anger, but fear. The fear of a woman exposed, her power slipping. She masked it with hatred, but I recognized the flicker. In that frozen moment, I understood something profound. This battle was no longer about tea or dessert or petty household slights. It was about erasure, about being written out of my own family's story, and I would not allow it. The tension stretched until the turkey grew cold, until the laughter could not be forced back. That night marked the fracture, not the end, but the beginning of something far more brutal. The moment when the facade of civility cracked and the war for my place, for my dignity, began. The moment the plates were cleared and the last of the children's laughter faded into nervous silence, I saw how the fracture at that table left everyone unsettled. Daniel avoided my eyes, his shoulders rounded as if he could fold himself into the chair. Sophia fiddled with her bracelet, glancing at me with worry, then at her mother with fear. My grandson, Ethan Jr., pushed peas around his plate, not daring to lift his head. The air was heavier than any storm I had ever walked through. When we moved into the kitchen, Vanessa's transformation was startling. To Daniel and the kids, she played the calm hostess, stacking plates with a tight smile, humming a tune under her breath. But when it was only the two of us at the sink, her mask slipped. She turned to me, eyes sharp, and spoke in a tone soaked with poison. "This house doesn't need your old traditions." The words landed harder than the insult at the table. There was no audience here to provoke. This was not heat-of-the-moment anger. This was deliberate, calculated, sharpened like a knife meant only for me. I placed the plate gently on the counter, my fingers steady, though I felt the weight of her contempt pressing in. "Traditions hold families together," I said evenly. "They are not clutter to be swept aside." Vanessa laughed quietly, not with humor, but with disdain. "Families move forward, Winnie. They don't need to be chained to your memories, your recipes, your little stories about the past. You think you keep us together, but in truth, you hold us back." Her words were meant to cut deep, and they did. Images flashed in my mind. Daniel's graduation day, the apple pie cooling on the windowsill, the night I signed over part of my savings so he could buy this very house. Each memory now twisted into a weapon in her mouth. "You think this house is yours because you helped sign a check?" she continued, lowering her voice, leaning close enough that I could smell the bitter tang of wine on her breath. "But it isn't. This is mine, my family, my rules. You are here because I allow it. Never forget that." I looked at her, my jaw tight. "You may command this kitchen, Vanessa, but you will never command my love for my family." Her eyes narrowed. "Love? Don't make me laugh. Love doesn't pay mortgages. Love doesn't cover braces. Love doesn't buy vacation homes. Money does. And the problem with you is that you confuse your handouts with affection. You think because you write checks, you've earned respect. But respect isn't bought, and you will never get it from me." Her cruelty was a steady stream, each word dripping with venom. But beneath the venom was something else, a pattern, a strategy. This was not a daughter-in-law losing her temper. This was a woman building a campaign, brick by brick, to erase me from my own bloodline. Sophia peeked into the kitchen, her small voice breaking the tension. "Mom, can I help with the dishes?" Vanessa turned with sudden sweetness. "No, darling, Grandma and I are just finishing up." She reached out, brushing Sophia's hair back, her smile perfect once more. When the girl left, that smile vanished like smoke. "You see how easy it is?" she whispered to me. "They look to me now, not you. You are a shadow at the edge of their lives. And soon, even that shadow will fade." I refused to let her see me flinch. Inside, the sting was sharp, but outwardly, I held firm. Children know truth when they see it, no matter how hard you try to cover it. Her laugh was cold. "Truth is written by the one who stays, and you, Winnie, are too old to last. One day soon, you'll be nothing more than a story they barely remember." Daniel entered then, carrying a half-empty wine bottle, his face stiff with exhaustion. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, trying too hard to sound casual. Vanessa slid her arm through his, her expression instantly soft. "Of course, dear. Just talking about holiday traditions. You know how passionate your mother can be." Daniel smiled weakly, avoiding my gaze again. then kissed her cheek. He believed her mask because it was easier than facing the cracks underneath. I stood there, dish towel in hand, watching the woman who wore two faces so easily, and realized just how dangerous she truly was. When Daniel left the kitchen, she turned back, her voice sharp once more. "You won't win, Winnie. You can glare at me all you like, but I've already won. Daniel belongs to me. The children belong to me. This home is mine, and one day soon, even your generosity will be forgotten." I answered with quiet steel. "What cannot be bought cannot be erased. They will remember who I am whether you like it or not." Her eyes blazed with fury, but she said nothing. She rinsed the last plate, set it on the rack, and dried her hands, her movements crisp, mechanical. Then she left the kitchen without a word, her heels clicking across the hardwood, each step like a drumbeat of war. I stood alone in the quiet kitchen, the scent of soap and turkey bones lingering in the air. My heart was heavy, yes, but heavier still was the clarity settling in. Tonight had not been about tea or dessert. It had been about power, about control. Vanessa was not lashing out because of a forgotten gesture. She was declaring her campaign to erase me from the story of my own family. And as the last glass dried in my hand, I understood something chilling. She would not stop until I was gone. The moment dinner ended, the tension lingered like smoke that refused to clear. Daniel excused himself quickly, retreating to the den with a glass in hand, pretending to check his phone. Sophia lingered near me, her small fingers tugging at the hem of her sweater, eyes darting between her mother and me as though she wanted to speak but feared the cost. Ethan Jr. avoided everyone, head bowed, pretending to scrape gravy from his plate, cheeks flushed with shame. Each of them carried the weight of what had just happened, and none of them had the courage to name it. In the kitchen, Vanessa's smile returned, as though nothing had been said at the table. She stacked plates neatly, humming a carol under her breath, her face painted with the charm she showed Daniel. But when she turned to me, her eyes cut like knives. She lowered her voice, sharp enough that only I could hear. "This house doesn't need your old traditions." I froze, dish towel in my hand, the sting of her words sharper than before. This was no passing insult, no slip of the tongue. It was strategy, calculated and deliberate, spoken with the cold certainty of someone who had already made up her mind. I met her gaze, refusing to let mine waver. Traditions are not clutter to be thrown away. They are what built this family. Her laugh was quiet, venom hidden beneath the sound. "Built this family? You really think stories about pies and old recipes keep us alive? Money pays bills. Money keeps this house standing. And you—" She tilted her head, her tone dripping with scorn. "You confuse writing checks with being needed." I clenched the dish towel tighter, but my voice stayed even. What I gave was never about control. It was love. She set a plate down hard enough for it to clatter. "Love is cheap. What you gave us came with strings. You make Daniel feel guilty every time you remind him of the house, the tuition, the favors. Don't pretend otherwise. That guilt is your way of keeping a seat at this table." Sophia walked into the kitchen just then, hesitant. "Grandma, do you want me to help with the dishes?" Her eyes searched my face, sensing the undercurrent. Vanessa's smile flashed instantly. "No, sweetheart, Grandma and I are fine. Go watch TV with your brother." Sophia hesitated, but left quietly. The moment she was gone, Vanessa's expression hardened again, her voice dropping to a near hiss. "Do you see how easy it is? They come to me, not you. They will remember me as the one who sets the rules, not you with your fading stories and pity gifts." Her cruelty was relentless, each word delivered like a rehearsed speech. She wasn't angry, she was triumphant. She wanted me to know she had a plan, a long game in which I was already erased. I steadied my breath. "Children know the truth, Vanessa. They know who stands by them when it matters." Her eyes narrowed, lips curving into a cruel smile. "Truth is what survives. And you won't. You're too old, too fragile, too desperate. You should be grateful I let you sit here at all." The venom in her words made my chest tighten. But something else stirred inside me too, a hardening, a shift. I had faced storms before, but this was different. This was a battle for my place in my own bloodline. Daniel stepped back into the kitchen, his face tired, eyes darting between us. "Everything okay?" he asked, pretending not to sense the hostility hanging thick in the air. Vanessa turned instantly, her smile soft and sweet. "Of course, dear. Your mother and I were just talking about holiday traditions. You know how passionate she can be." She brushed his arm lightly, pulling him in with practiced ease. He smiled weakly, nodding, and kissed her cheek. He wanted peace, even if it meant blindness. His silence cut deeper than her insults. When he walked away, she leaned closer to me, her voice low and searing. "You see, he will always choose me, because I give him what he needs, freedom from your guilt. Soon, even he will believe you don't belong here." I laid the dish towel on the counter, my hands steady, my voice quiet but sharp. "What cannot be bought cannot be erased. I am his mother, and their grandmother. That is not yours to take." Her glare deepened, fury twisting her face for a brief moment before she masked it again. She dried her hands briskly, heels clicking against the hardwood as she left the kitchen. I stood alone, surrounded by the scent of soap and roasted turkey. The house I had helped pay for no longer felt like a home. It felt like a battlefield. The laughter of my grandchildren floated faintly from the living room, but even that sound was stained now by her poison. As I looked at the empty sink and the drying rack filled with dishes, I understood fully. This wasn't about tea or dessert, or even this single holiday. Vanessa was dismantling my presence piece by piece, replacing me with herself. And I knew then, as surely as I had ever known anything, that if I did not act, she would succeed. It was only 3 days after Thanksgiving when the knock came at my door. 2 officers stood in the hallway, their uniforms crisp against the pale morning light. My heart sank before they even spoke. Vanessa had moved faster than I imagined. "Mrs. Clark," one officer said, flipping open a small notebook. "We received a call from your daughter-in-law. She claims you made threatening statements toward her during the holiday dinner." The words felt surreal, but the expression on his face told me he was not surprised. He had heard it before, family disputes twisted into accusations. I kept my voice steady. "Threatening statements? No. I told her to stop calling me when she needed money. That was the truth, not a threat." The younger officer shifted, glancing at me with measured eyes. "She provided us with a voicemail. It sounds like your voice, saying something about taking away what she loves most. Can you explain that?" I stared at him, stunned. "A voicemail?" My stomach clenched. Vanessa had fabricated evidence. "I never said those words," I answered firmly. "If you play the whole recording, you will hear the difference. I suspect it's been edited." The older officer nodded, jotting notes. "We're not here to make an arrest. We just need to follow protocol. Right now, this is a warning. Keep your distance until things are sorted out." I watched them leave, my chest tight with fury. She had not only insulted me, she had tried to brand me as dangerous. It was not enough for her to push me out of the kitchen or out of the family table. She wanted to erase me entirely, by law, if she could. That evening, Daniel called. His voice was low, heavy. "Mom, Vanessa told me you said some awful things. Did you really tell her you'd take everything away from her?" Pain shot through me sharper than any knife. "Daniel, I never said that. She edited a voicemail and she handed it to the police. Do you hear yourself? You're asking if I threatened your wife when you know me. You know me." He sighed, weariness in every breath. I don't know what to believe right now. She's upset, the kids are shaken, and the police came to our house too. I don't want this tearing us apart." "It's already tearing us apart," I snapped, then steadied myself. "Daniel, look at the pattern. She hides my cooking. She insults me at the table. Now she calls the police with false evidence. Can you not see what she's doing?" Silence stretched across the line. "I don't want to talk about this anymore," he finally muttered. "I need time to think." And then he hung up. The dial tone lingered, cold and final. I sat at my kitchen table that night with every receipt, every bank slip, every reminder of the ways I had carried this family, tuition checks, mortgage payments, even the deposit slip for the very house where Vanessa now reigned. I traced each line with my finger, my jaw clenched. She had taken my sacrifices and weaponized them against me, and Daniel, my own son, could not find the courage to defend me. The following morning, I walked to the grocery store. Whispers followed me down the aisles. Neighbors who once waved now looked away, pity in their eyes. Vanessa had spread her story well, painting me as bitter, unstable, a relic unable to let go. That humiliation burned more than her words at Thanksgiving. She wasn't just tearing me down in private, she was trying to bury me in public. Later that week, I ran into Officer Morales, a woman I had known for years from the community center. She had been one of the officers who came to my door. She leaned in quietly, her voice low. "I don't buy her story, Winnie, but she's clever. Be careful. She's trying to set a trap." Her warning tightened the knot in my chest, but it also lit a spark. Vanessa was playing a long game, yes, but she underestimated me. That night, I looked in the mirror. My reflection showed lines etched from years of sacrifice, but behind them burned something new, resolve. She wanted me silenced, branded, erased. Instead, she had awakened the part of me that refused to be a victim. I whispered to myself, steady and sharp, "If she wants war, she will have it, but it will be on my terms." Daniel might avoid the truth for now. The children might not see the full picture yet. But I knew with clarity that Vanessa's campaign would not stop until I fought back. She thought her fabricated voicemail could break me. Instead, it marked the moment I chose to rise. Because the deepest betrayal is not the insult, not even the false accusation. The deepest betrayal is when your own son stands in silence while someone else rewrites your story. That was the wound Vanessa had carved into me. I drove back to Boulder that night with the world outside glowing brighter than I had ever seen, yet my chest carried only weight. Strings of Christmas lights lined the houses, blinking red, green, and gold, as if the whole city was determined to shine against the winter cold. Children ran across front yards, dragging sleds, laughter ringing through the air. To them, the season was joy. To me, it was a cruel reminder. The brightness of the streets mocked the heaviness in my chest. The road narrowed toward my apartment complex, a modest building tucked away at the end of a quiet block. I parked the car, sat for a moment with the engine off, and let the silence settle. My hands rested on the steering wheel longer than they needed to. I didn't want to move because I knew what was waiting upstairs. Finally, I stepped into my apartment. The air smelled faintly of pine from the small artificial tree I had decorated alone the week before. The ornaments were old, some handmade by Daniel when he was a child, others collected from flea markets through the years. They hung unevenly, but I left them that way, a reminder of times when imperfection was love, not shame. I crossed to the desk in the corner, pulled open the bottom drawer, and lifted out the box that held more than paper. It held my history, my sacrifices, my life. The first slip I pulled out was Sophia's tuition receipt. I remembered her excitement when she got into that private school, the way she hugged me so tight she nearly knocked the wind out of me. Vanessa had smiled that day too, but it was a smile of relief that someone else was footing the bill. My chest tightened as I ran my fingers over the faded ink. To Sophia, it had been a gift of love. To Vanessa, it was currency. Next was the mortgage document, my signature next to Daniel's, proof of the night I wrote a check that drained the savings Robert and I had built together. Daniel had stood in the kitchen with hope in his eyes, saying, "Mom, this house will be where our family grows, where my kids will feel safe." I had believed him. I had believed the house would bind us. Instead, it became the stage where my presence was tolerated like an unwanted guest. The wedding invoice was still there too, folded carefully in its envelope. The flowers, the caterer, the band, Vanessa's dream day, held up by my checkbook. I had thought I was building a bridge to her heart, showing her I would treat her as my own. But now, when she looked at me, there was no trace of gratitude, only contempt. Then came the receipt for the roof repairs. Daniel had called me late at night, worry in his voice about leaks that wouldn't stop during a storm. I didn't hesitate. I wrote the check. That was what mothers did, wasn't it? Yet looking at the receipt now, all I could see was another knife in my chest, another reminder that my love had been translated into dollars, then dismissed as meddling. I spread the papers out on the table, each one cutting deeper than the last. They were not just financial records. They were proof of every time I had traded comfort for their security, every time I had put them ahead of myself. And still, to Vanessa, I was nothing more than an old woman clinging to relevance. I whispered into the quiet room, though no one was there to hear me. How did my love turn into this? When did my sacrifices become a debt to be resented? The words hung in the air. My throat tightened, but I refused to let tears fall. This was not a night for weakness. It was a night for clarity. I picked up Sophia's tuition slip again. I could still hear her laughter when she showed me her first report card, her little arms wrapped around my waist. That was real. That was love. Vanessa could twist it. Daniel could forget it. But I knew the truth of that moment. I set the paper down, my hands steady. I realized then that the problem wasn't only Vanessa's cruelty. The problem was that I had allowed my sacrifices to be invisible. I had written checks in silence, believing gratitude would grow naturally, believing love would flourish without words. Instead, my silence had allowed someone else to rewrite my role. The truth settled over me with the weight of stone. For years, I had been paying not for their needs, but for permission to stay close, and permission could be revoked at any time. I rose from the table and looked out the window. Snow had begun to fall, flakes drifting through the glow of a street lamp. Children would wake to a white morning, their laughter filling the air again. But I stood there, fists clenched at my sides, and made a decision. No more. If Vanessa wanted me erased, she would learn how difficult that would be. If Daniel wanted to look away, I would give him no choice but to see the truth. My sacrifices had been treated as nothing more than numbers on paper, but those numbers held power. And I was done letting that power be used against me. I turned back to the table, to the receipts and contracts spread before me. They were no longer just reminders of pain. They were evidence. They were weapons. And in the quiet of that small apartment in Boulder, I vowed I would no longer be the victim of my own love. Nights in Boulder were quiet, but quiet did not mean rest. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the radiator filling the silence. Sleep refused to come. My mind replayed everything: Vanessa's smirk, Daniel's silence, the police at my door. The weight pressed down on me heavier with each passing hour. I turned, pulled the blanket tight, and closed my eyes. But memory has a way of cutting through the dark. Suddenly, I was back 20 years earlier, when Daniel was still chasing dreams instead of trying to survive them. He had just opened his first office downtown, a tiny space above a bakery. The air smelled of cinnamon rolls, and his desk was nothing more than a door propped on filing cabinets. I remember the call that came late one night. His voice was low, tense. "Mom, I can't cover rent this month. The clients aren't paying on time. I don't know what I'm going to do." I had no savings to spare. The bills were already tight. I looked at the jewelry box on my dresser, the one that still held my wedding ring. Robert had slipped it on my finger decades earlier, his eyes shining with hope for our future. That ring was the last piece of him I wore. The next morning, I walked into a pawn shop with shaking hands. The man behind the counter inspected the ring, weighing it with the cold detachment of someone who saw love turned into cash every day. He offered me less than half of what it was worth. I swallowed hard, nodded, and walked out with enough to keep Daniel's office alive another month. When I handed him the envelope of cash, Daniel hugged me, whispering, "I'll pay you back, Mom. I promise." He never did, and I never asked. That sacrifice became one of hundreds, and I told myself it was worth it. His success would be my repayment. His happiness would be enough. But now, lying in the dark of my small apartment, I realized that every unspoken sacrifice had come with a hidden cost. I had shielded him so often that he never learned to shield himself. I had poured everything into his life, and in doing so, left room for Vanessa to seize control. My love had been unconditional, yes, but it had also been unguarded. I sat up in bed, the sheets falling to my lap, and whispered into the stillness. Did I do this to myself? Did I hand her the power by never setting limits? The thought cut deeper than Vanessa's insults. I had always believed sacrifice was the highest form of love, but maybe I had confused sacrifice with silence. By never demanding recognition, I had allowed my contributions to be rewritten as obligations. By never holding Daniel accountable, I had made it easy for him to drift into the role of a bystander. I rose and walked to the kitchen. The moonlight spilled across the table where the stack of receipts and contracts still lay. I traced my fingers over them again, each one like a scar. Tuition, mortgages, repairs, the wedding, the office rent from all those years ago. I could see a line connecting each one straight to this moment. I whispered, "Every paper here is a wound, every dollar, a knife," and I gave them willingly. I poured myself a cup of tea, but the steam rising from the mug could not warm me. I looked at the window where snow had begun to fall again, flakes clinging to the glass. Outside, the world prepared for Christmas, families decorating trees, children writing wish lists, couples holding hands under lights. Inside, I felt stripped bare, hollowed by the knowledge that my love had been mistaken for weakness. But as I stood there, the weight shifted. The pain did not vanish, but it hardened into something sharper. Clarity. I realized that if I continued down this path, if I kept giving without demanding truth, I would vanish exactly as Vanessa wanted. I sat at the table, pen in hand, and began writing in a notebook. Not a grocery list, not a budget, a plan. For the first time in years, I was not simply reacting to their needs. I was preparing for my own survival. My voice, low but steady, filled the quiet apartment. No more. I won't buy silence. I won't buy love. And I will never again let someone twist my sacrifices into chains. The clock ticked past midnight, but I did not return to bed. The sleepless night became my awakening. I understood now that dignity was not something others could give me back. It was something I would reclaim for myself. And as the snow thickened outside, I promised myself, the next chapter of this story would not be written in shame. It would be written in strength. I sat at my small kitchen table, the stack of receipts and contracts still spread before me, but my eyes no longer saw only numbers. They saw patterns. Every payment, every emergency, every sudden request, it all felt orchestrated. And the one constant in the middle of it all was Vanessa. The question would not leave me. Who was she before she married Daniel? That night, instead of trying to sleep, I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen lit the dim room as snow drifted outside. I typed Vanessa Mitchell Denver into the search bar. At first, results were clean. Social media posts, family photos, a few volunteer events. Too polished, too curated. I narrowed the search, looking deeper into old forums and archived local news articles. Then I saw it. Buried in a legal notice from nearly 10 years ago, there was a name, Vanessa J. Mitchell, linked to a civil suit. The company name was familiar, a mid-sized financial firm that had since shut down. My breath caught when I read the charge. Embezzlement. The case had been sealed, but the remnants of it lived in the digital cracks. Court filings listed an office manager accused of siphoning funds through duplicate accounts. The age listed matched Vanessa's. The location was Denver. The timeline ended just months before she met Daniel. I whispered to myself, "It's her." My fingers hovered over the trackpad, my heart pounding. I dug further, pulling up credit records through a background check site I had used once for a tenant. Vanessa's name surfaced alongside others. Vanessa James, Vanessa Parker, V. Mitchell, each tied to addresses scattered across Colorado, each linked to debts, credit cards, payday loans. This wasn't just a woman with a temper. This was someone who built new skins when the old ones failed. I scribbled notes as I read, my pen pressing hard against the page. Multiple names, sealed embezzlement case, debt patterns, alias accounts. And my handwriting grew tighter, angrier. The memory of her smirk at Thanksgiving replayed in my head. Her words, "This house doesn't need your old traditions," took on a darker meaning now. It was never about tradition. It was about control. I had been wrong to think of her as only cruel or jealous. She was strategic. She was calculated. She was dangerous. The phone buzzed on the table. Daniel's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring once, twice before I answered. "Mom," he began, his voice cautious. "Vanessa says you've been digging into her past. Why are you doing this?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Because the past matters, Daniel. Don't you wonder why she hides so much? Don't you ever question why her story begins only with you?" His silence stung more than his words. "She told me you're obsessed, that you're trying to make her look bad so you can drive a wedge between us." I almost laughed, bitter and sharp. "Daniel, open your eyes. I'm not destroying anything. I'm uncovering what's already there." He exhaled, tired. "I can't do this right now." The line went dead. I set the phone down, my hand shaking. Vanessa was ahead of me again, spinning her narrative before I could speak. She was always one step in front, and I realized the fight wouldn't just be about exposing her lies. It would be about surviving them. I turned back to the laptop, pulling up archived employee directories from the financial firm. I found her photo. Different hairstyle, but the same sharp eyes. My chest tightened. This was proof, undeniable. Yet I knew if I showed Daniel, he would refuse to see. I whispered, "She's been playing this game for years." The clock ticked past 2 a.m., but exhaustion never came. I pieced together fragments, building a portrait of the woman who had invaded my family. She wasn't spontaneous or reckless. She was methodical. Each alias, each debt, each reinvention was another step in a long game. As I flipped through the pages of my notes, I realized my sleepless nights had changed. They were no longer about humiliation or hurt. They were about strategy. For the first time, I saw Vanessa not as a daughter-in-law who despised me, but as an opponent who had underestimated me. I closed the notebook, my voice firm in the empty room. If she wants to erase me, she will fail. This time, the truth will not stay buried. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the streets in silence. But inside, I felt the first spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. I knew I couldn't carry this fight alone anymore. The evidence I found in the dark corners of the internet had weight, but Vanessa was clever. She twisted stories, planted lies, and turned silence into guilt. I needed allies who understood both the law and the games people like her played. So I called Officer Karen Morales. She was the one who had come to my apartment after Vanessa's false 911 stunt. She had seen me calm, collected, not the hysterical threat my daughter-in-law had painted me to be. When Karen arrived at the small cafe in Boulder, she slid into the booth across from me, her dark hair pulled back, her uniform jacket still dusted with snow. She leaned forward. "You said you found something?" I nodded, sliding the folder across the table. Inside were the printouts I'd gathered, credit records, court filings, the old embezzlement case. She studied them, her brows furrowing deeper with each page. "This isn't small," Karen said finally. "If these connections are real, your daughter-in-law is not just vindictive. She's been running cons for years." I met her eyes. "She's not going to stop until she strips me from my family. I need to end this, Karen, not with another shouting match. I need her to expose herself." Karen tapped the folder. "That means a controlled setup. You can't just accuse her. She'll twist it like she always does. We need her on record admitting something." That was when I mentioned Ethan Cole. He had been my late husband's friend, a family lawyer who had handled our estate. He wasn't flashy, but he was sharp. I trusted him. The three of us met in Ethan's office the next afternoon. The place smelled faintly of leather and old books, with family photos framed on the wall. Ethan adjusted his glasses as I laid everything out. Vanessa's insults, the false police report, the sealed embezzlement case, the aliases. He listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, he leaned back. She thrives on manipulation, that much is clear. But if you want to bring her down legally, you need to bait her greed. That's her weak spot. Karen nodded. We can monitor, but the hook has to come from you. Something irresistible, something she can't pass up. The idea settled in me slowly, but once it took root, it felt inevitable. I said, what if I offered her money, early inheritance, framed as a tax decision, something large enough to lure her, but structured in a way that forces her to reveal accounts she shouldn't have? Ethan leaned forward. That could work. If you word it carefully, she'll volunteer information to get her hands on it. Once she does, we'll have what we need. Fraud, concealment, false accounts, but it has to be believable. I swallowed hard. $200,000. Enough to make her eyes shine, but not so large it seems outlandish. I can say I want to give Daniel and the children a gift early to reduce future taxes. Karen's pen scratched across her notebook. We'll wire you with a recorder. Ethan will draft paperwork that looks authentic. We'll be nearby to step in if she tries to push too far. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady ground under my feet. This wasn't just me taking hits and whispering prayers. This was strategy. We spent hours working through the details. Ethan explained how inheritance transfers could work, showing me documents with seals and headers that looked official. He even created a simple ledger where Vanessa would need to list accounts for verification. Karen rehearsed scenarios with me. She'll test you. She'll push boundaries, maybe try to isolate you from Daniel. Stay calm, keep her talking. The more she speaks, the more rope she gives herself. I practiced responses, my voice level. Of course, Vanessa, I trust you to handle the finances. That's why I need your details for the paperwork. Each time I said it, I imagined her greedy smile, the way her mask slipped when money was in play. When the meeting ended, Ethan clasped my shoulder. Winnie, this is not about revenge. This is about reclaiming your dignity. Remember that. I drove home through falling snow, the city lights blurring in the windshield. My chest felt lighter than it had in months. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I wasn't reacting to her cruelty. I was moving with purpose. That night, I cleared the table again, laying out the receipts that once felt like daggers. This time, I didn't see wounds. I saw evidence, proof of a pattern that would finally come to light. I whispered to myself, "You wanted me erased, Vanessa, but I am still here, and soon the world will see you as you are." The plan was in motion. $200,000, a baited hook wrapped in paper and ink. She thought she had written the story of my downfall. She had no idea she was about to walk into the first chapter of her own unraveling. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon, a cozy December refuge where strangers huddled over steaming cups to escape the cold. Outside, snow fell in lazy spirals, muffling the city's noise. I had chosen this place carefully. Neutral, public, and safe. Officer Morales was seated at a table near the window, with her newspaper folded neatly, pretending to read while her earpiece connected her to the recorder hidden in my purse. Ethan, my lawyer, sat several tables back, his laptop open, his expression casual. They looked like ordinary customers. They weren't. I sat at the corner booth, my hands wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea I had barely touched. The steam curled upward, softening my features, but inside I was coiled tight. Today was not about comfort, it was about exposure. When Vanessa walked in, she carried herself like the room belonged to her. A fur-trimmed coat draped over her shoulders, manicured nails tapping against her phone, lips painted the kind of red that warned people she was dangerous. She spotted me immediately, her smile widening with practiced warmth. "Winnie," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "This is a surprise. A coffee date between us? Finally." I returned her smile gently, though mine had no pretense. I wanted to talk somewhere quiet, about the future. Her eyes flickered with curiosity. then sharpened with greed. "Go on." I took a slow sip of tea, letting the pause stretch. "I've been thinking about Daniel and the children, about their stability. I want to give them something for the future, something substantial, an early inheritance." Her breath caught, barely audible, but her composure returned in a blink. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "How substantial?" 200,000, I answered softly, sliding a folder onto the table. Inside were mock documents Ethan had prepared, gift letters, tax planning papers, everything stamped and formatted to look official. "I want to do it before the new year, for tax purposes." Vanessa's hand twitched toward the folder, but she stopped herself, forcing her expression into calm neutrality. "That's very generous and thoughtful. Daniel will be thrilled." I tilted my head. "Yes, though I was thinking it might be simpler if I worked with you directly, since you handle the finances." Her guard lowered instantly. She couldn't resist. "That's true. Daniel's too busy with work to bother with details. I take care of everything, bills, investments, taxes. It would be much easier if you and I just managed this quietly. I'll make sure the money is put in the right places." My fingers tightened around the teacup, but my voice stayed even. "I'll need account numbers, routing information, proof of balances. The IRS can be very strict, you know. Ethan insists everything must be documented." She nodded eagerly. Of course, I can give you all of that. We have the joint account, naturally, but there are others too. Household expenses, investment accounts, even a consulting company I run." She pulled a sleek leather planner from her purse, flipping through neatly tabbed pages. With the ease of someone accustomed to manipulation, she began listing numbers, balances, institutions. I watched her pen move across the page, each stroke digging her own grave. "And this one," she added casually, sliding the paper toward me, "is under a different name for privacy. You understand, of course. Sometimes, in this world, discretion is everything." Her smile was sharp, daring me to question it. I kept mine soft. "Of course, I trust you." The recorder in my purse caught every syllable, every account, every admission. Officer Morales didn't look up from her paper, but I saw her pen tapping twice, a subtle signal that everything was clear. I leaned back, feigning relief. "You've made this so much easier. I was worried Daniel might not understand the complexities. I'm glad you're here to handle it." Vanessa preened, her shoulders straightening with pride. "Daniel is lucky, really. Without me, he'd be lost. And with your help, Winnie, we'll make sure this family thrives. It's good you finally see that I'm the one who holds it all together." My heart thudded, but I kept my expression serene. Inside, I burned with both fury and satisfaction. Her arrogance was the rope tightening around her own neck. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "I know you've doubted me, but you can stop worrying now. Trust me, I'll take care of everything." I folded the paper she had scribbled on and tucked them into the folder, sliding it back into my bag. "I believe you, Vanessa, more than you realize." She laughed lightly, sipping her latte, unaware that the walls had just closed in on her. As we rose from the booth, I wrapped my scarf around my neck, the air between us thick with her imagined victory. But as I stepped into the cold outside, the snow biting at my cheeks, I knew the game had shifted. It happened on a Thursday morning, the kind of day that begins so ordinary you'd never guess how quickly it would shatter. I was at my apartment sipping tea when the phone buzzed. It was Officer Morales. Her voice was clipped but steady. "Winnie, today's the day. We're moving in." I didn't go to the house. That wasn't my place. But I knew what was about to unfold. I imagined the quiet suburban street, the neighbors sweeping snow off their driveways, when suddenly 3 police cruisers pulled up in front of Daniel's home. The slam of doors, the sharp command of voices, the thud of boots on the porch. Later, Daniel told me he had been at the kitchen counter, scrolling through emails, when the knock rattled the door so hard his coffee spilled. He opened it to find officers lined up, their badges glinting. Behind them, Vanessa froze mid-step, a mug of cappuccino in her hand. "Mrs. Foster, one officer announced firmly. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Fraud, identity theft, and financial misrepresentation." The mug slipped from Vanessa's hand and shattered against the tile. For a moment, she was too stunned to speak. Then her voice rose, shrill and desperate. "What? No! This is insane! Daniel, tell them! It's all lies! She set me up!" Daniel stood rooted to the floor, his eyes wide, his mouth struggling for words. "Vanessa, what is this?" She whipped toward him, her hair flying, her face twisted in panic. "Don't just stand there. Tell them I'm your wife. Tell them this is a mistake." But the officers moved swiftly, their hands sure as they clicked the cuffs around her wrists. Vanessa's voice pitched higher, cracking under the weight of fear. "Daniel, please. It's your mother. She's behind this. She hates me. She's been digging into my past. She planted everything." The lead officer's voice was unyielding. "Ma'am, we have recordings, documents, and corroborating evidence. You can explain it in court." She twisted in their grip, her eyes blazing. "No, this isn't real. You're all being manipulated. I'm the victim here." Daniel's face went pale. He wanted to believe her. I could see it in the way he clutched the counter, knuckles white. But every scream, every denial, every wild accusation only pulled the curtain back further. Sophia and Ethan Jr. appeared at the top of the stairs, still in pajamas. Sophia clutched the railing, her eyes huge, her voice trembling. "Daddy, what's happening to Mom?" Daniel looked up at them, his mouth opening, but no words coming out. The children's confusion was a blade twisting deeper into the silence. At that moment, I arrived. Not inside their home, but on the edge of their lawn, where neighbors had already begun to gather. The sight was brutal. Vanessa shrieking, Daniel paralyzed, the children terrified. But my steps carried me forward, past the whispers, past the stairs, until I reached Sophia. She broke away from the staircase and rushed into my arms, shaking. "Grandma, I don't understand." I held her tight, smoothing her hair, my voice low and steady. "You're safe now. That's all you need to know. You are safe." Ethan Jr. stood close, his small fists clenched, his jaw trembling. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not your fault. None of this is on you." Behind us, Vanessa was dragged toward the cruiser, still howling. "This isn't over! I'll destroy you, Winnie! You'll regret this!" Her voice cut through the cold air, but it didn't shake me. It only confirmed what I already knew. She was incapable of remorse. Even in chains, she saw herself as the victim. Daniel finally stumbled outside, his face stricken, his eyes darting between me and the squad car. "Mom, how did this happen? What did you do?" I met his gaze without flinching. "I didn't do anything, Daniel. She did this to herself. And deep down, you know it." His lips parted, but no defense came. The officers guided Vanessa into the back seat, her shouts muffled when the door slammed shut. The engine roared to life, and just like that, the woman who had tried to erase me was gone, taken away not by my words, but by her own greed. Sophia's tears dampened my coat. I kissed the top of her head. "Hush, sweetheart. This storm is over. The truth has spoken." The neighbors lingered, murmuring, some shaking their heads, others nodding as though they had long suspected. But I didn't care what they thought. My focus was on the two children clinging to me, the only innocents in this unraveling. Daniel sank onto the porch steps, burying his face in his hands. He wasn't ready to face me, not yet. That reckoning would come later. For now, the silence between us said enough. I stood in the cold, the children pressed against me, the sound of the squad car fading down the street. I felt no triumph, no gloating satisfaction, only clarity. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was as quiet as a child's heartbeat against your chest, as steady as the truth that could no longer be denied. The days after Vanessa's arrest turned the house in Denver into something I had never wanted to see. Once, that home had been a symbol of promise, the place Daniel swore he would build his family. the place I helped him secure with my own savings. Now it felt like a cracked shell, every corner echoing with arguments, every room heavy with truth too long denied. Daniel called me one evening, his voice frayed. "Mom, can you come by? The kids are upstairs. Vanessa won't stop yelling. I don't know what to do anymore." When I arrived, the front door was ajar. Inside, the warmth of holiday lights clashed with the chaos of raised voices. Vanessa stood in the foyer, her hair unkempt, her wrists still bearing faint red marks from the cuffs. She had been released on bail, but the fire in her eyes burned hotter than ever. "You think you can just throw me away?" she screamed at Daniel. "This house, this life, everything we built, it doesn't exist without me." Daniel's face was drawn, his voice low but trembling. "Vanessa, stop. This house exists because my mother sacrificed for it, because she believed in us. And you've been lying since the beginning." She turned her fury toward me the second I stepped inside. You poisoned him against me. You've been waiting for this moment, haven't you? To make me the villain so you can crawl back into his life. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Vanessa, you wrote your own story, and now you're choking on the words." For a moment, silence fell. The children's footsteps creaked on the stairs. Sophia peeked out, her eyes wide, while Ethan Jr. hovered behind her, confused and afraid. Daniel noticed them and gestured. "Back upstairs, both of you." His voice broke slightly. "It's going to be okay. I promise." But promises in that house had lost their meaning. The shouting resumed. Vanessa clawed at every thread she could still reach. "You're weak without me, Daniel. Who will pay the bills? Who will keep everything in order? You don't even know half of what it takes to run this house." Daniel's reply came like a crack of thunder. "Then maybe it's time I learn, because I'd rather struggle alone than live another day inside your lies." Her face twisted, tears streaking her makeup. "You think she'll save you? Your mother? She'll suffocate you just like she always has. She doesn't give, Daniel. She controls." I stepped forward, my voice steady, though my chest ached with the venom in her words. "No, Vanessa. Love doesn't control. Love sacrifices. You've never understood the difference." Daniel rubbed his forehead, his voice quieter now but final. "I filed the papers today, for divorce. I can't raise my children in this. I won't." Vanessa gasped as though struck, her body shaking. You can't. You're nothing without me. Nothing." Her scream rattled the chandelier, her fists pounding the wall until plaster cracked beneath her hands. The house, my son's dream, my investment, bore the marks of her unraveling. Daniel sank onto the bottom step of the staircase, his hands trembling. He looked at me, eyes red, voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, how did I not see it? All this time, I defended her. I let her twist everything, even you." I knelt beside him, placing my hand over his. "Because you loved her. Love blinds us, but it doesn't have to break us." Vanessa slumped against the wall, her sobs turning bitter. "This family isn't yours anymore," she muttered, echoing the words she had spat at me on Thanksgiving. But this time, her voice lacked power. It was hollow. Sophia crept down the stairs, her small hand resting on Daniel's shoulder. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. His reply was raw but true. "Yes, we're going to be okay. Because we're starting over. Without lies." I reached for Ethan Jr., drawing him near, feeling his small body lean against mine. His heart beat fast, but his voice was soft. "Grandma, will you still come here?" I kissed the top of his head. "Always. I never left, sweetheart. I was just waiting for the truth to come home." The house fell into a heavy quiet, the kind that follows storms, when destruction is clear but so is survival. The walls bore cracks, the family bore scars, but the lies had been dragged into the open. As I left that night, the snow outside glowed under the street lamps. The house behind me stood tall but fractured, like Daniel himself, wounded but ready to rebuild. For the first time in years, I knew he understood. This wasn't about money or houses or debts. It was about dignity. And though Vanessa still fought like a cornered animal, her grip was broken. The house she once claimed as hers now belonged to Truth. I arrived at the Denver house on a gray afternoon, the air sharp with winter cold. Daniel had asked me to watch Sophia and Ethan Jr. while he went to meet his lawyer. The children were upstairs, their voices muffled by laughter and video games. I walked slowly through the living room, the house still holding the stale tension of too many arguments. From my coat pocket, I pulled out a small camera, no bigger than a matchbox. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. I wasn't setting a trap out of spite. I needed truth, clean and undeniable, something that could never be twisted again. I bent down, fastening the camera beneath the edge of a shelf facing the couch. It clicked into place so quietly that even I barely heard it. I whispered to myself, no more shadows, no more guessing. That evening, after Daniel returned, the storm began. I pretended to read in the guest room, but the sound of raised voices carried easily through the thin walls. Later, when I reviewed the footage, I saw everything in merciless clarity. Daniel stood near the fireplace, his tie loosened, his face flushed with exhaustion. Vanessa paced the room, her hands cutting the air with every word. "You think you can just erase me?" she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "Divorce won't fix this. You'll crawl back to me when you realize you can't handle life on your own." Daniel's reply came sharp. "No, Vanessa, I'm done. I won't let the kids grow up in a house built on lies. I won't let them watch you tear everyone down." She laughed bitterly, circling him like a predator. "Lies? You want lies, Daniel? Your mother's been feeding you her little poison drops for years. She's always wanted me gone, and you've been too blind to see it." He shot back, his voice breaking. "This isn't about her. This is about you. The evidence, the accounts, the things you hid." Her face hardened, and she slammed her hand against the coffee table. "Evidence? Don't make me laugh. Every penny I touched, I deserved. You think I was going to live like some housewife scraping by? Please. That old woman paid for everything. I just made sure her money wasn't wasted." Daniel's shoulders stiffened. "Her money wasn't yours, Vanessa. It was her sacrifice. For me. For the kids." Vanessa's voice grew sharper, laced with venom. "Sacrifice? She threw cash at you to feel important, to control us. Don't you get it? Without her, you wouldn't even have this house. She bought your success, Daniel, not you. And I took what was offered. Every tuition check, every mortgage payment, every so-called gift. And I used it to give us the life we deserved. Spa days, furniture, vacations. Because why should I live small just because she's pathetic enough to cling to her checkbook?" The words hung in the room like acid. Daniel's face went pale. "You're admitting it. You used her. You used me." Vanessa smirked, her eyes glittering. "And I'd do it again. Because you never stopped me. You were too weak to question it, too desperate to keep the peace. You think the police scare me? You think your little mother scares me? She gave me the keys to this life, Daniel, and I took them. That's not fraud. That's survival." Daniel's voice broke, raw with betrayal. "Survival or greed?" The silence that followed was thicker than any scream. Vanessa folded her arms, her chin lifted high, but the mask had slipped. The truth had poured out of her, unguarded and vile. Upstairs, Sophia called softly, "Daddy?" The children had heard more than they should have. Daniel closed his eyes, his hand pressing to his forehead. "Go back upstairs, honey. It's okay," he lied, his voice cracking. But it wasn't okay, and I knew it never would be, not after what I had captured. Later that night, when the house finally quieted, I retrieved the camera. I watched the footage again alone in my apartment, the screen glowing against the darkness. Every word Vanessa had spit in fury was now sealed, undeniable. It was more than proof. It was confession. My heart ached, not from doubt, but from the cold weight of finality. I had wanted truth, and now I had it. Vanessa had revealed herself, not as a misunderstood woman, not as a victim, but as a thief, a manipulator, a destroyer of trust. As the video ended, I closed my laptop and whispered, "The children are safe now. And Daniel will finally see." The camera had given me more than evidence. It had given me clarity. And with that clarity came a grim peace. The mask had shattered, and all that remained was truth. When I placed the small flash drive into Ethan's hand, I felt the full weight of everything it carried. That little piece of plastic and metal held the raw truth, stripped of excuses, recorded in Vanessa's own voice. Ethan, calm as always, slid it into his laptop. His brows furrowed as he watched, and though he tried to remain neutral, I saw his jaw tighten. When the recording ended, he leaned back in his chair. "Winnie, this is it. This isn't just evidence, it's a confession. No judge could ignore this." Daniel sat across from him, silent, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles blanched. For a long moment he couldn't lift his eyes. Finally he whispered, "I knew, but I didn't want to know. She said all of that. And I still wanted to believe her." Ethan's voice was steady, professional, but firm. "You don't have to defend her anymore. The court needs facts, and this gives us everything." I reached across the table, my hand resting over Daniel's. "You're not blind anymore, son. That's what matters." The trial came faster than any of us expected. The Denver County Courthouse loomed gray and imposing the morning of the hearing. The corridors echoed with shuffling papers, hushed conversations, and the distant sound of gavels striking wood. Inside the courtroom, the air felt heavy, the kind of heaviness that settles when a family's future hangs in the balance. Vanessa sat at the opposing table, her lawyer whispering furiously in her ear. She looked polished, her hair smoothed, her suit crisp, but her eyes betrayed the panic simmering beneath. When she caught my gaze across the room, she smirked, a flash of the arrogance I had come to know too well. Daniel sat beside Ethan, shoulders squared but stiff. I saw him glance toward Sophia and Ethan Jr., seated quietly behind me with a guardian appointed by the court. Sophia gripped her brother's hand so tightly I thought their knuckles might bruise. The proceedings moved swiftly. Vanessa's lawyer painted her as a misunderstood wife, accused unfairly, persecuted by a mother-in-law who resented losing control. Words like vindictive, manipulative, and biased were tossed toward me, but I didn't flinch. I knew what was coming. When it was Ethan's turn, he rose slowly, his voice calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, we have video evidence, uncoerced, unedited, captured in the respondent's own home. In this footage, Mrs. Foster makes multiple admissions about misusing marital funds, manipulating her husband, and exploiting his mother's finances for personal luxury." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Ethan pressed play. The courtroom filled with Vanessa's voice, sharp and venomous. "That old woman paid for everything. Every tuition check, every mortgage payment, every so-called gift, and I used it to give us the life we deserved. Spa days, furniture, vacations. Why should I live small just because she's pathetic enough to cling to her checkbook?" Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Sophia squeezed my arm, her face pale but resolute. Daniel sat frozen, his eyes fixed on the table, as if unable to look up. The video continued, Vanessa's arrogance laid bare, her laughter chilling. "She gave me the keys to this life, Daniel, and I took them. That's not fraud, that's survival." When the screen went dark, the silence was absolute. Even Vanessa's lawyer looked stricken. The judge leaned forward, her expression stern. "Mrs. Foster, do you deny making these statements?" Vanessa shot to her feet, her voice trembling with rage. "It's out of context. He provoked me. This is all her doing." She jabbed a finger in my direction. "She set me up. She hates me. None of this is fair." The judge's gavel cracked against the wood. "Enough. Sit down." Vanessa collapsed into her chair, muttering curses under her breath. Ethan's closing was brief, but devastating. Your Honor, the welfare of the children must come first. This video shows a pattern of manipulation, financial abuse, and contempt for the very family Mrs. Foster was entrusted to care for. We ask that custody be awarded to Daniel Foster and that Mrs. Foster's access be limited in accordance with the best interests of the children. The judge's decision was swift. Custody of the children is granted to the father, Daniel Foster. Visitation rights for the mother will be determined following psychiatric evaluation and the outcome of her criminal proceedings. Sophia burst into tears, but they weren't the tears of fear I had seen so many times before. These were tears of release, of freedom. She clung to me, her voice breaking. "Grandma, it's over, isn't it? She can't hurt us anymore." I held her close, whispering into her hair. "Yes, sweetheart. You're safe now. Truly safe." Daniel finally lifted his head, his eyes wet but clear. But he looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years, gratitude unclouded by denial. "Mom, thank you for never giving up, for saving them, for saving me." I squeezed his hand, my own throat tight. "All I ever wanted was for you to be free, Daniel. Free to build something honest." As we left the courthouse, the winter sun broke through the clouds, casting pale light across the steps. Vanessa remained inside, surrounded by officers and her crumbling facade. For the first time, the house, the lies, the endless battles, they no longer held power over us. The children's laughter rang out faintly as they ran ahead, the sound fragile but real. And in that moment, I knew the battle had ended. The courtroom felt colder that morning, though the heat was turned high. I sat quietly in the second row, hands folded in my lap, watching as the final chapter of Vanessa's schemes unfolded. She entered flanked by 2 deputies, her designer clothes traded for a plain gray suit. The arrogance she once wore like armor had thinned. Only shards of it remained in the tight set of her jaw. The judge read out the charges: fraud, identity misrepresentation, financial manipulation. Each word landed like a stone dropped into water, ripples of consequence spreading wider than she could control. Vanessa shook her head furiously, whispering to her lawyer. But no defense could erase the recordings, the bank statements, the years of deception she herself had confessed to when anger loosened her tongue. When the verdict came, the gavel struck with sharp finality. "Guilty," gasps whispered through the gallery. Daniel sat beside Ethan, shoulders squared, his eyes wet but unwavering. Sophia leaned into him, her hand clutching his arm, while Ethan Jr. sat stiff, trying to be brave. I caught the boy glancing at me, and I offered a small nod. He didn't need to be afraid anymore. Vanessa turned then, her eyes blazing, her voice shrill. "This is a setup. She pointed at me, her finger trembling. "She wanted me gone from the start. You're all blind. Blind." The bailiffs moved closer. The judge's stern voice cut her off. "Order in the court." I didn't move, didn't speak. I had no desire to trade words with her. She had already condemned herself with her own voice, her own greed. Outside, when the proceedings ended, Daniel drew a shaky breath. "It's over." His words hung in the air like a man stepping out from years of shadow. "Really over." Ethan clasped his shoulder. "Now you begin again, this time on your own terms." Daniel nodded, his eyes finding mine. "Mom, I don't know how to thank you. For the house, for the sacrifices, for never giving up." I placed my hand against his cheek, something I hadn't done since he was a boy. "You don't have to thank me. Just live honestly. Raise those children with love, not lies. That's all I ever wanted." Later, back at the house that had once been a battlefield, Sophia tugged my sleeve. "Grandma, are we safe now?" Her voice was fragile, but her eyes glimmered with hope. I pulled her into my arms, her small body pressed against my chest. "Yes, sweetheart. You're safe. You and your brother will grow up free from her chains." Ethan Jr. leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Will Dad be okay without her?" I glanced toward Daniel, who stood at the window, looking out at the bare trees swaying in the winter wind. His back was straighter now, his breath deeper. "Yes," I said softly. He will, because sometimes losing what poisons you is the only way to heal. That evening, Daniel and I sat together at the kitchen table. The same table where, months earlier, Vanessa had sneered that old women like me didn't belong. Now it was quiet, filled only with the sound of the children upstairs unpacking their things. "I should have seen it sooner," Daniel murmured. "All the money, all the excuses. I let her control everything because it was easier than facing the truth." I reached across the table. "We all choose blindness when we're afraid of what we might see. The important thing is that your eyes are open now." He nodded, tears slipping free. "I'll do better. For them, for you, for me." I smiled faintly, though my chest ached with both grief and relief. Then justice has already done its work. The days that followed were not triumphant parades, but small, steady steps. Sophia laughed more freely, her drawings no longer filled with shadows. Ethan Jr. slept through the night without waking from bad dreams. Daniel began cooking dinners, simple meals that tasted of effort and sincerity. And me? I did not celebrate loudly. There was no joy in seeing a woman led away in cuffs, even one who had hurt me so deeply. Justice, when true, is not a shout of victory, but a calm exhale. One evening, as I left the house, Sophia pressed a folded note into my hand. In her uneven handwriting it read, "Family isn't who makes rules. Family is who makes us feel loved." I tucked it into my coat pocket, my heart heavy and light all at once. Justice had been served, not just in the courtroom, but in the quiet rebuilding of a family scarred yet surviving. And I, at last, felt something I had long forgotten. Peace. The afternoon light in Boulder had a softness I hadn't felt in years. My small apartment smelled of cinnamon, butter, and pumpkin. The familiar scent of a pie cooling on the counter. The hum of the oven and the tick of the old kitchen clock wrapped the room in a rhythm that felt steady, safe. Sophia arrived just as the timer dinged, her backpack slipping from her shoulder, her hair wind-blown from the ride over. She dropped her things near the door and came straight to the kitchen, her eyes landing on the pie. "You made it," she said with a grin, sliding into one of the wooden chairs. "The real pumpkin pie, the one Mom never let us have." I set the dish down between us, steam rising in lazy curls. "It's been too long since we shared one together." She picked at the crust with her fork, not eating yet, just turning it over in her hands. "It feels different now. Like everything's quieter. Even Dad. He's not so tense all the time." I poured her a glass of milk, watching the sunlight fall across her face. The girl who once shrank into herself during arguments now looked steadier, her voice carrying both relief and sadness. "Quieter is good," I said softly. "Quieter gives room for healing." She hesitated before speaking again. "Grandma, did you ever hate her?" I took a slow breath. The question sat heavy between us. I thought of all the nights replaying words I wished I had said, all the wounds left by Vanessa's cruelty. "No," I said finally. I pitied her. Because a person who only knows how to take, who can't love without control, that person will never have peace. Sophia's eyes watered, but she nodded. "I don't want to be like her. I don't want to grow up angry." I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. "You won't. You've seen the damage anger causes. You'll choose differently." We sat in silence for a while, the kitchen filled with the golden light of late afternoon. I cut the pie, placing a slice on her plate. She took a bite, and her shoulders eased. "It tastes like home," she whispered. I smiled, the corners of my eyes stinging. That's what family should taste like. Familiar, safe, shared. She looked at me, waiting for more, so I gave her the words I had been carrying. "Family isn't who claims the table, Sophia. It's who truly shares it with love." Her tears slipped free, but she smiled through them. "I'm glad I have you." The truth was, I had her too, and that mattered more than any victory in court, more than any wealth stripped away from Vanessa's grasp. As the sun dipped lower, the shadows stretched across the floor. The pie grew smaller, our plates fuller, and laughter returned in small bursts. Hesitant at first, then easier, freer. I leaned back in my chair, watching my granddaughter laugh, her fork tapping against the plate. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim waiting for the next blow. I felt steady, in control, at peace with every scar. The world outside could keep its storms. Inside this kitchen, there was light, warmth, and love enough to begin again. And when Sophia gathered her things to leave, I caught my reflection in the window. My smile was quiet, but it was mine. Not the smile of someone enduring, not the forced calm of survival. It was the smile of a woman who had reclaimed herself. I whispered to the empty kitchen, "No more chains, no more fear." And with that, I knew my story wasn't about revenge or even victory. It was about freedom. Thank you for being part of this journey.